This is the story of two nations that signed a Pact of Steel, but ended up in a pact of blood. In 1939, Italy and Germany were supposedly the closest allies in Europe, bound by fascism and the personal bond between Hitler and Mussolini. Beneath the newsreels of smiling dictators lay a reality of deep mistrust, cultural clashes, and eventual betrayal. From the freezing steppes of Russia to the sun-scorched sands of North Africa, Italian soldiers quickly realized their German comrades viewed them not as brothers, but as tools. When the alliance finally shattered, that unease turned into one of the most brutal occupations in history. Before the first shot was fired, the tension was already visible on the streets of Rome. When German officials flooded Italian cities in the late 1930s, the locals didn't see them as liberators or partners. They called them I cruci, a slang term derived from the Croatian word for bread that mocked the hungry Austrian soldiers from the previous war. To the average Italian shopkeeper, these new allies were stiff, arrogant, and obsessed with rules. A common joke in 1940 summed it up. Germans loved Italians but didn't respect them, while Italians respected Germans but didn't love them. The Pact of Steel, signed in May 1939, felt like a cage to many. Mussolini pushed the alliance, but the Italian public remained deeply skeptical of a partner who seemed ready to drag them into a war they knew they couldn't win. In the blistering heat of North Africa, the alliance was tested by fire and failed miserably. German officers driving superior vehicles often looked down on Italian troops, who were forced to fight with outdated artillery and tanks that soldiers nicknamed sardine tins. The resentment was mutual. Italian diaries from El Alamein described German units retreating with the only available transport, leaving their Italian allies to walk across the desert or face capture. One Italian officer noted that, although Rommel was a genius, the average German soldier treated the Italians like servants. They hoarded water and kept the best fuel. Yet when the fighting started, those same inferior Italian divisions like the Ariete often fought to the last man to cover a German retreat, earning a grudging respect that came too late to save the relationship. If North Africa was difficult, the Russian front was where the hatred truly solidified. Tens of thousands of Italian troops were sent to support Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union, ill-equipped for the brutal winter of 1942. When the Red Army broke the lines at Stalingrad, the retreat became a horror story of ally turning against ally. Survivors reported that retreating German trucks would forcefully push exhausted Italian soldiers off the road to clear the way. There are accounts of German units refusing to share heated shelters with freezing Italians, leaving them to die in the snow at 40 degrees below zero. That winter marked the death of the Brotherhood. The soldiers who managed to walk back to Italy didn't bring stories of glory, but stories of a partner who would sacrifice them without a second thought. We examine history's most complex alliances every week. If you want to see more untold stories from World War II, subscribe to the channel now. The facade finally collapsed on September 8, 1943. When Italy announced an armistice with the Allies, the country was thrown into absolute confusion. The German army had prepared for this exact scenario with Operation Achse. They moved with terrifying speed to disarm their former friends. Italian soldiers, who had received no clear orders from their fleeing king, simply didn't know who to shoot. In barracks across the country, German troops surrounded Italian units and gave them a choice: keep fighting for Hitler or surrender your weapons. Most Italians just wanted to go home and shouted, "Tutti a casa!" But the Germans weren't letting them leave. In a matter of hours, the man who had shared your cigarettes yesterday was pointing a rifle at your chest. Nowhere was the German fury more evident than on the Greek island of Cefalonia. The Italian Acqui division, stranded and surrounded, refused to hand over their weapons. General Gandin, their commander, did something extraordinary and held a vote among his troops. They chose to fight. For a week they held off their former allies, but when they finally surrendered, the Wehrmacht showed no mercy. Hitler had ordered that no prisoners be taken. Over 5,000 Italian soldiers were executed in cold blood. They were shot in quarries, their bodies left to rot or dumped into the sea. This wasn't war anymore. It was punishment. The massacre at Cefalonia proved that to the Nazi command. A traitor was worse than an enemy. After the armistice, over 650,000 Italian soldiers were captured by the Germans. They were given a simple offer: to join the new fascist army in northern Italy or go to a prison camp. Astonishingly, nearly 600,000 of them refused. They chose starvation and forced labor over fighting for Hitler and Mussolini again. To punish this defiance, Germany denied them POW status, labeling them Italian military internees to bypass the Geneva Convention. They were starved, beaten, and worked to death in German factories. 50,000 of them never returned. These men weren't active partisans, but their refusal to pull a trigger for the Reich was one of the largest acts of mass resistance in the entire war. For civilians, the German soldier transformed from a rude tourist into a terrifying occupier. The SS and Wehrmacht applied brutal collective punishment to the Italian population to crush the partisan movement. If partisans killed one German, 10 Italians would be executed. This policy led to horrors like the Marzabotto massacre, where entire villages were wiped out. In that mountain community, German troops systematically murdered over 770 civilians. They killed priests, women, and children. The youngest victim was Anna Pardini, a baby just 20 days old. By 1944, the hatred for the Tedeschi was absolute. The myth of the civilized German army had been buried in the mass graves of Tuscany. Northern Italy became a puppet state called the Republic of Salo, where Mussolini ruled in name only, while German generals pulled the strings. Here, fear and survival complicated the view of the Germans. Die-hard fascists fought alongside the SS, hunting down their own countrymen. Yet even among these loyalists, private diaries reveal a deep sense of humiliation. They knew they were fighting for a foreign power that despised them. Meanwhile, along the Gothic line, Italians were forced to dig fortifications for the German defense. The country was physically and psychologically split between those who prayed for the Allies to arrive and those who clung to the sinking Axis ship. Despite the atrocities, the human connection wasn't entirely erased. In rural areas, there were rare instances where individual German soldiers turned a blind eye to hiding partisans or shared food with starving families. This created a difficult memory in Italian culture, distinguishing between the brutal Nazi and the poor conscript just trying to survive. This distinction often served a psychological purpose after the war. By blaming everything on the evil German occupier, Italy could distance itself from its own fascist past. The narrative became convenient, painting Italy as the victim and Germany as the villain. But history shows that for 3 years, they walked the same dark path together. When the war finally ended in 1945, the relationship between Italians and Germans was shattered. The Pact of Steel had resulted in the death of nearly 500,000 Italians. The survivors of the Russian front and the concentration camps brought home a deep, lasting bitterness. For decades, the word Tedesco in Italy carried the weight of that betrayal. It wasn't just about the violence, but the arrogance. The Italian experience of World War II is unique because they fought both with and against the Germans, seeing the Wehrmacht from the inside and the outside. They learned that in a war of dictators, there are no friends, only temporary interests. The story of what Italians thought of Germans is a lesson in the fragility of political alliances versus human reality. What started with propaganda parades ended with massacres in the mountains. It took generations for these two nations to rebuild trust and become the partners they are in Europe today. The scars of 1943 prove that shared ideology is no substitute for mutual respect. If you want to explore more hidden sides of history like this, subscribe to the channel for the next episode.